Hello, my name is Pastor Ron Sinclair, and today I'd like to share a story with you. It's from this book, Real Life Stories, the Inmate to Inmate edition. It's found in chapter 11 on page 55. The title of the chapter is I Was on the FBI's 10 Most Wanted list. It's Happy Jack's story. He tells us, when I was 8 years old, his dad came home from the service. Mom had worked as a nurse's aide at the local hospital. With both parents gone most of the time, Johnny and he were alone together constantly. He became Happy Jack's best friend, his teacher, confidant. When they were separated, the first seeds of rebellion took root in the fertile soil of anger and hate and hurt. He stood on the steps of the school one sunny afternoon, waiting for Johnny to pick them up. And when he opened the car door, he saw that Johnny was crying. Silently, Happy Jack slipped into the seat beside him and watched the tears rolling down his cheeks. He said, "I have to go with Dad. You're staying with Mom." Dad had divorced Mom, Johnny explained, but they hadn't separated us. That was the judge's decision. A judge was somebody who sentenced murderers to the electric chair or made bad men go to prison. Why would a judge want to take Johnny away from me? Johnny took Happy Jack home, but this was the last time. Happy Jack stood and he was on the sidewalk and he was crying as he watched Johnny's car, watched it vanish around the corner. At first he couldn't accept the fact that one man, a judge, had the power to separate Johnny and him. All he knew was that the judge had torn his young life apart. The judge must be against me, he said. He wants to destroy me. He hates me. So Happy Jack hated him back with an anger that he had never known before. Mom and Dad still went to the same church. Sunday, Happy Jack decided was an unhappy, uncomfortable place to be. Sitting in a church meant being hurt. So he started sneaking out. Praying could go on half the night. That gave some of the kids plenty of time to find something fun to do. No one would notice a couple of skinny boys skipping down the aisle. Since it was a Pentecostal church, everyone had their hands raised and their eyes closed. And they slipped out and met in the parking lot behind the church. The first night they stuck to the church grounds. The second night, they got up enough nerve to go down to the amusement park a couple of blocks away. It was exciting and harmless except for one thing. He didn't have enough money. The quarter that Mom had given him for the offering plate didn't go very far in the park. The next week, all of his friends except him backed out. They decided that sooner or later they would get in trouble. But that didn't bother Happy Jack. If Mom wanted to waste half of the night in church, fine. Happy Jack was going to the park. One Sunday night, the inevitable happened. He didn't make it back to church in time. And he found Mom waiting in the parking lot for him. What did she do? She prayed. Mom was one of those prayer warriors. She figured the solution to every problem was prayer, hard prayer. Happy Jack didn't need anyone praying for him, and he didn't want God or anybody else to change him. For years, he flew into a rage whenever anyone said that they were praying for him. Soon after, his church friends chickened out. The couple of them that were still going to the park found some new friends who wouldn't chicken out. They didn't want to go to the church. There was a new friend he found, a freckled face with red hair, an Irish young man. They made good friends. They became good friends for a long time. Years later, they were still friends, as partners, however, in organized crimes, and one of the most dangerous teams in the Midwest. But for now, well, they were just a couple of kids trying to pick up a buck or two. When they stole their first set of hubcaps, it was just a prank. A man approached them, asked if the hubcaps were for sale. They accepted his offer eagerly. The man told them that he wouldn't mind having a few more hubcaps. He'd even like a few extras too. And he'd pay a lot more. But the next few months, they stole hubcaps and extras. Within 2 years, they had graduated to wholesale car theft. They stole cars, stripped them, and sold the parts to the man in the park and some other men. When Happy Jack entered high school, he discovered a talent that would become his career: violence. He had always been a good fighter because Johnny and his friends were 6 years older than him. He had always had a mean streak too. When he was just 6 years old, he put their paper boy in the hospital. Every day the paper boy would try to hit Happy Jack with their paper. One day, when he saw him coming, he dragged a snow shovel behind a tree. And when the paper boy rode by, Happy Jack jumped out, swung the shovel with all of his might, and the bike went one direction, the boy went in another. The papers flew all over the street. Everyone thought that he hadn't really meant to hurt him. But they were wrong. He wasn't sorry at all when the ambulance came. Now, he was in high school. He was bigger and meaner. One day, a guy stabbed him in the knee, and Happy Jack threw him down a flight of concrete stairs. He landed at the bottom right in front of the door, just as the teacher was stepping out into the hall. He got expelled. He didn't think that it was fair, but, well, then he knew that the authorities never were fair. He got expelled again when a teacher hit him on the hand with his stick for having a comic book hidden in his math workbook. The teacher meant to knock the book out of Happy Jack's hand and missed and came down on his knuckles. Happy Jack reacted on instinct. He jumped up and slugged the teacher. He graduated from high school. In the 1950s, the era of the black leather jackets, ducktails, and motorcycle gangs. He had it all. He'd already made up his mind what he wanted to be. His hero was the James Cagney type of gangster. He wanted to be just like him, a top gangster, not just a thug. You've got the right temperament, a rough-looking sergeant looked at him and said. He made him squad leader 2 weeks after he arrived at the Air Force Base. By the right temperament, he meant that Happy Jack was as mean as a snake. He started fighting almost the minute that he arrived and didn't stop for 3 years. After basic training, he was shipped to an Air Force base in Germany. He hadn't been in Germany but for a few days when he discovered that the little Fräuleins were only too willing to play all kinds of games with the American soldiers. He began a lucrative business in prostitution. He got involved in a host of black market activities. He was making money hand over fist. He was having a great time. He played drums in the bass band, wrecked cars for guys who wanted to collect the insurance money, raced, gambled, and as always, fought. He had a summary court-martial for his attitude and was always in one kind of trouble or another. Many incidents in the military contributed to his ability to have to deal with physical pain, which planted seeds of drug addiction. He was discharged from the hospital in the Air Force in the same day, February 1958. He had no plans, but he decided to go back to Indiana and find something, or perhaps somewhere around Chicago. That night, he pumped himself full of pills to make the drive from Philadelphia to Indiana without stopping. He'd be home by morning. As it turned out, he wouldn't be home for another year. On a sudden whim, he stopped for a quick drink at a bar that he knew. And when he went in and sat down, a middle-aged man who introduced himself as Tony struck up a conversation with him about his son, who was still in the service. So when he was buying him drinks and telling him how much Happy Jack reminded him of his son, a couple of hours later he invited Happy Jack for a night on the town. All the drinks on me, he urged. Come on, you can leave in the morning. Why not? Happy Jack thought to himself. Well, if he's got the money, I guess I can make the time. As soon as they sat down in the first bar, the bartender walked over to them and slipped Tony a white envelope. He didn't think anything of it until it happened again and again. Happy Jack wondered about it, but he didn't want to ask any questions. When they walked into the fifth bar, again the bartender came up to him. This one started yelling and cursing Tony, and then suddenly slugged him. Before Happy Jack knew it, he had landed on the bartender and worked him over. But Happy Jack straightened up, fixed his tie, returned to Tony. He noticed that Tony was looking at him in a new light. He was grinning from ear to ear. That night, Tony hired Happy Jack as an enforcer for his organized crime operations. Happy Jack was ready for the job, and he wanted the money. His career was on the up. He was getting paid for doing what he always used to do for free. He rarely went to a bar without hurting somebody before the night was over anyway. In a few weeks into his new career, he was sent to a club in Wildwood, New Jersey, to do some enforcement. He ended up doing too much. The manager wasn't cooperating. Happy Jack got mad, started punching, and just went crazy. He busted his shoulder with the butt end of a double-barreled shotgun that he used, and then shot up the place. The club looked like a tornado had hit it. When Happy Jack walked out, the manager was lying on the floor, groaning. The incident was the turning point in his career. It gave him a reputation which is almost as valuable as a gun in enforcement. The brutality of the incident alarmed the local police. Suddenly, Happy Jack was a dangerous new man to East Coast crime operations. Across the nation, law enforcement agencies that kept tab on organized crime activity sat up and took notice. A few weeks later, Happy Jack was in a club as a client when he overheard a man at the next table talking about some enforcer. He said, "Well, you should have seen the club when Happy Jack got through with it." When he mentioned where the club was located, Happy Jack realized that the man was talking about him. He had been nicknamed Happy Jack by some of his friends because he snickered during a night of enforcement. He liked the name and it stuck. He was happy. When he was in a bad mood, which was almost all the time, he would punch some guy for no reason. And he'd wind up in court the next day. Violence was his way of relieving frustration. After he would punch some guy who had nothing to him except perhaps honk his horn or get in his way, he'd get a phone call the next morning. "Jack," his lawyer would sigh, "we have another assault and battery charge against you." He'd go in the court, pay the fine, walk out. They both got tired of the routine. It was costing Happy Jack a lot of money. So he put an end to it. When his lawyer told him that someone had filed an assault and battery charge against him, he would find out who it was. Then he'd go to his house and tell him to go down to court and drop the charges, or he would be hurting a lot worse the next time. The charges were always dropped. There were so many instances of violence. He's now certain God wasn't laughing. One time an old Salvation Army man came by Happy Jack's cigar store every week to collect donations from his customers. One week when he came in, Happy Jack was annoyed and threw a $10 bill in his hat just to hurry him up. He didn't want his customers bothered with religion. When the old man saw the bill, he said gratefully, "Son, God bless you, I'll be praying for you." "Son, I'm praying for you. God promised, and I'm praying for you." Mom's words always brought back a flood of emotions. He felt the anger rise up inside. He hit the old man, picked him up, and threw him out the door. Just about every law enforcement in various parts of the country were trying to come up with enough evidence to send Happy Jack off to prison for the rest of his life. Staying one step ahead of the law was a thrill for him, all of its own. However, his luck staying one step ahead of the law eventually ran out. 4 days after his arrest, he was handed a letter through the bars. It was from his wife, Carolyn. He sat down on the cot and began to read. He wasn't prepared for this. It said, "I've given up all hope for you. I have prayed for you for 7 years. But now I know that not even God could reach that far down in the gutter. Not even God could change a man like you. I know that you will be out soon, but I don't want you to see me or the children again, ever." At last, all of the hurt that my wife had suffered all of these years had come out. When she heard that I had robbed another bank and had been arrested, she just couldn't take anymore. She was sick of the hurt that he had caused her, sick of loneliness. He didn't blame her. She had been faithful to him all of these years. She had stayed with him and loved him. As he read the letter again, he realized how much she had loved him just to stick it out this long. He had pushed emotions aside for so many years. He hadn't felt the sting of rejection like this since he was a child. At first, he was sorry that he had lost his last tie with the outside world. And then he realized that the aching in his heart was something deeper. A terrible loneliness swept over him as he sat on the cot staring at the letter. He suddenly realized that no one in the whole world loved him. He began to long for God to make himself real to him. Evidently, God determined that it was the right time to make his reality known to him personally. He went into his cell and he fell to his knees and he cried like a baby. He hadn't cried since he was 11 years old, but now he couldn't stop the tears. His family had called. Carolyn still loved him. God had done this. He had given Happy Jack back his family, not just a sign that he asked for, that someday he could have them back. God did love him. Jesus did go to Calvary for him. He didn't care that 27 other prisoners were standing in the cell watching. Nothing mattered to him but God. His surroundings fell away. And mentally, he was 1,000 miles away from the jail. He didn't know how to say a prayer. He remembered that a man had told him to ask Jesus into his heart and he would wash his sins away. He couldn't get the words out fast enough. Jesus, he cried, I don't know what you can do with this mess I've made of my life. But if you want it, it's yours. Oh, Jesus, come into my heart and make me a new person. As he wept and prayed, it felt like God reached down and turned a faucet on the inside of him. And the hate and anger flowed out. And the greatest peace he had ever known flooded his heart. And he knew something tremendous was happening to him. He poured out his heart to God. And he was pouring out his heart back to Happy Jack. Praise God. After that, God put a bigger, happier smile on his face that many say has never left. The name of Happy Jack followed him wherever he went, but the reason for being happy wasn't because he took pleasure in hurting people like before. He was now happy knowing that God loved him, forgave him. And he was working for the real boss, the judge who controls the eternal destiny of every person. God graciously released him from prison sooner than his scheduled sentencing time originally pronounced by the judge. After his spiritual born-again conversion, his heart began to have deeper concern from other inmates and families and the families of those close inmates. And that didn't leave him once he walked outside of those walls. He had an ever-growing desire to go back into the prisons to help people find a peace with their Creator like he had been blessed to have found. God placed a call on his life and his precious wife, Carolyn's wife, as well. He opened doors in so many prisons across the country and even out of this country that Happy Jack couldn't begin to count how many they've ministered to. This is Happy Jack's story. From real life stories, inmate to inmate. If you'd like to learn more about this ministry, you can write Step-by-Step Ministries at 815 South Babcock Road, Porter, Indiana, 46304. Or you can call Jim Barbarossa, the leader, at 219-787-9933. Or contact their website at www.step-by-step.org. I hope that Happy Jack's story has touched your life in a special way. And I hope that you'll come back to hear more stories from this book, or check out some of the other books that are published by this ministry. God bless you. Today, God bless you every day, in every way, and in all ways. Amen. Amen.